So my background is in journalism, right? And I was writing for Business Week and Fast Company, and I was covering companies like AT&T and Disney and Nintendo and Groupon, mostly B2C companies, right? But some of it would be B2B, like Oakley selling to the military or AT&T selling into healthcare. But innovation was the focus. So when I decided to make a turn to PR, I sought out a few people with more experience than me and said, it seems to me there's this really big divide between B2B and B2C, and I'm not sure which way to go because I've kind of have experience, visiting both types of companies. And the speech that one gentleman gave me was, you want to be in B2B, it's where all the action is. And I'm like, what? Even this is like iPhones and PlayStations and sneakers and whatever. And he says B2B is where all the innovation is in terms of the levers of the economy, energy, manufacturing, and sustainability, and the list goes on, right? Like healthcare, communications. They're B2B is where the big things happen that move the entire economy, and particularly if you're interested in things like climate change, sustainability. This is going to be where these things happens first, right? Battery technology, green energy, that sort of thing. And that pretty much swung me into B2B. And I was like, okay, that sounds exciting. Also, he is like, you're going to be helping sell products that are tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars, right? Instead of not to shortchange any other products, but stuff that might only be like a couple $100 or maybe like a computer or something like that. So that swung me to B2B. And so today I thought we'd talk a bit about B2B versus B2C, your impressions of doing PR for both of these sectors. So maybe you can tell us in your mind, just what do you think the fundamental difference is, like the basics, B2B versus B2C?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about the fundamentals, but I think, to my mind, one of the most interesting things that you just touched on there was the high capital cost of a lot of B2B equipment, right? And that in and of itself often means that you're dealing with products that have a much longer life cycle. And actually, the number of touch points you get with the audience and the kind of length of time you get to present to them or encounter them means that you can tell much richer stories. And to my mind, I always think that makes it just a much more interesting segment to be in. I mean, we do often like touch on B2C work, or we have certain projects or products that have more of a B2C approach, and we have to sort of switch to a much faster pace because almost all B2C work is done at a much more rapid rate. But you find that it's personally, I find it just a bit more flash in the pan, right? I really like the fact that you can talk about features and benefits. You can talk about technology and how that impacts the application. Then you can talk about the customer support. You can talk about the longevity of products on in particular applications. And I just don't think you really get that with more sort of consumer work. I guess you maybe see it a little bit with some of the car brands and the auto brands, when they tell those really nice stories about their history. So you kind of see it a little bit with that. But then otherwise, I think a lot of that much deeper storytelling is kind of happening in the B2B segment, and we have that journalism background, right? And that's, what first attracted you, or one of the things that attracted you to SE10 11 years ago, was it 10 years ago, whenever it was, and it's still such an important part of what we do today, right?
Sure. I mean, as you said that, I did think about when you read public relations news sites or blogs or sort of industry rags, if you will. It seems like there's a lot of turnover with their clients, a lot of RFPs, a lot of those big B2C brands are moving their business all around or moving to projects, right? Like design a project and do an RFP because we have this big initiative or new product coming. Whereas my impression of B2B and our experience at an agency is you have really long-term clients because you're telling stories over years, if not decades, about what these companies do and about what their customers do and how they in turn grow their own companies using your clients' products.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, we could almost do a separate podcast, right, on the that whole business of RFPs and putting proposals together, and how that sort of how you sort of structure your agency and your business to cope with that, and what you should, what kind of resources and input you should be putting to those on a regular basis. Because you're right, it is. I mean, it's such an everyday part of PR, really, for so many agencies, including us. But you're right. Yeah, we've been very fortunate that we've had some very long-term clients. 20 plus years. I mean, really since day one. The first couple of clients have been with us the whole way, and it's been really nice to grow with them and develop with them. From the earliest days of printing out and sending press releases with hard copy images in envelopes out to media, through to early email distributions just with the attachments, and then on through HTML and tracking, and into that whole digital transition and social media, and on into all those different elements of it. And yeah, I'm quite proud of the contributions we've made. It is a real, you become such an embedded part of the client, and you form such strong relationships with them, and it's a real thrill, when you see them succeed with a particular product line that you were working on behind the scenes and building up to, or if there's some particular high profile project that they've been involved with that's achieved either a lot of coverage or some really high profile coverage. And I still get a buzz out of that 20 years later, don't you?
Yeah. One of the reasons I wanted to move into PR was to be part of a team, right? Like when I was a journalist, I felt a bit like a lone wolf, like it's you and your editor, and I felt sometimes like everyone was mad at you, no matter what you did. The company you wrote about was mad at you. The analyst, you didn't say exactly what they said, they're mad at you. The readers didn't like it. But being part of a team with PR and having clients, everyone's working to success, and you enjoy that together. But one of the reasons why probably it's harder for a company to change their PR agency very often in B2B is the level of knowledge that they need to be able to communicate the brand effectively, right? So
Yeah.
if you're working with a very high-tech agency, or sorry, if you're an agency working with very high-tech clients, for example, we have a client that uses digital tools to affect water and energy consumption in several industries: manufacturing, energy, packaging, food and beverage. And they're using artificial intelligence, predictive analytics, prescriptive analytics, IoT, remote monitoring, mixed with new sorts of chemistry and science. That's something that it takes you even a couple months to really get versed in what all that means for their customers, and then years to really lock it down and be an expert on that, of how digital tools really might affect a nuclear power plant, and to see a case study, a challenge, a solution, and then results. That kind of knowledge takes years to build and become an expert. So it probably, that is why there's less project based and it's not so fast moving sometimes, it's a bit deeper learning experience, and then the stories you tell really have to resonate in terms of dollars and cents, because potentially millions of dollars could be involved in working with one of these companies.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, I mean, the fundamentals of that really plug back into journalism, right? So at its core, that ability to understand a subject, often with not very much prep or insight, and to be able to extract a story from it, that's a skill, right? That needs training. And I mean, actually, with your background, you have better understanding of that than me. But you're right. I mean, you are having to try and get your head around um, complex chemistry and the digitization of water one day, or you might then move into cutting edge marine propulsion, and then you might jump back into um, engineering on super tall buildings or something like that. And so every day you're having to say, all right, what's a really eye-catching story within this, and how am I going to tell it? Well, first of all, how am I going to simplify it, right? Because you're just overwhelmed with a huge amount of technical information, and then asking the right questions, pursuing the right lines with the experts or the engineers to be able to extract the right storylines from that, and then packaging it all up in something that's going to appeal to um, well, potentially, to mainstream or business press, but even packaging stuff for trade press has to be done in the right way. I mean, it is the richness and the quality of the story is such an important part of achieving success in B2B, right?
Yeah, yeah. And like when I was a journalist, I mean, you would follow companies on a beat, right? And so you would check in with that company every few months, and they would have something new, and then you'd write a story and you'd put it out, and that would be the end of it. But the kind of work that you're talking about, we're telling ongoing stories with these companies in PR,
Right.
right? So, and even sometimes we're saying, this is where we are now, and then this is where the company wants to go, and here's what it's going to take to get there. And it can be visionary a lot of times, of like, we're working towards this sustainability goal, or we're working towards this automated job site, right? And actually, to take it back to that original anecdote I told about the gentleman who gave me advice, I do think he was right in terms of B2B being where the levers of the economy are. Um, and I don't want to downplay B2C at all, because we all buy these products and it's super important. And actually, as we're going to talk about, I steal a lot from B2C PR people, and the ideas that they bring forward, and pay attention to it and think they're equally as genius in a different way. But some of the clients you mentioned, right? We have, they work in construction. So you're seeing how civilization is building yourself. You're seeing how skyscrapers are being built, and new energy plants, and the advances in safety that they bring, and efficiency. Or we have clients, right, in the marine sector, and it's making boating more safer for humans and for marine life, and reducing energy consumption, and the possibility of, let's say, like fuel spillage, that sort of thing. Um, we have a client that makes lawnmowers and snow blowers, and they're moving electric for the for these big commercial companies, and that has implications in terms of when you can mow a lawn near a school, or an old folks home, or a hospital. And these have really real implications for the overall economy, and for the people involved. Um, so I do think he was right, and I do think it's one of the great things about doing B2B is, if you do have a passion for something like climate change or efficiency or people's lives being better, we get the chance to do that with these clients. We get to see how one piece of technology can take, let's say, the painting of an automobile, used to take 1,000 gallons of water and they're trying to get it down to 10 gallons of water, right? Times X number of automobiles made daily, times 365 days a year around the world, right? We might hear in news media to shut the water off when we're brushing our teeth in between, like brushing sessions. But that's, pun intended, not a drop in the bucket compared to saving hundreds of gallons of water per car that's painted. So yeah, I don't know. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think yeah, that obviously, I mean, we sort of track back to the discussion around the scale of the products and the product projects that you get involved with in the B2B sector. But I think just at the start of what you just said there, you kind of touched on another interesting, I suppose, aspect of how we run the agency at SE10 in terms of the people we look for, because obviously we have historically hired a lot of journalists. I'm from a journalism background myself, and you already had some very high profile jobs in journalism, and we talked a little bit about the kind of natural curiosity that has to be embedded in you to even succeed at being a journalist, right? Yeah, it's a skill, but you also have to have that natural storytelling curiosity to be able to ask the right questions and get in there and pull the most interesting elements out of a particular story. But it also sort of feeds into the kind of the people, the team that we have at SE10, and how we've got to build that and develop that. And when we're doing our interviews and we're looking for new execs or managers or directors, and we've had a lot of people down the years that have sort of come to us from different kind of backgrounds, and some have had that agency experience, others have had journalism experience, but not so much on the B2B side. But I would say really that kind of curiosity and the passion for learning is, I don't know, I mean, certainly for me, when I'm doing interviews, that's always something I'm really looking for, right? Because you're not really going to be interviewing too many people in a PR environment that have some sort of expertise in the chemicals business, right? There's always a limited pool of those people out there. But if you get the right people with the right passion for learning and understanding, we've had so many success cases down the years, of people coming in with limited experience, nurturing them up, onboarding them with clients, and then seeing them turn into really quite skilled and creative storytellers and account leads for all sorts of different B2B brands,
Yeah, yeah. And slight detour, but for me, I think part of that curiosity comes from a liberal arts background, and I think it's been very in vogue the past few years to bash liberal arts education and college for the sake of college, and education for the sake of education. Granted, these types of degrees aren't for everyone, and a lot of people can go into a STEM field and make a lot of money a lot faster, and probably maybe be more useful for society, right? I think we need more electricians and plumbers and welders and craftsmen, and I have the utmost respect for that coming from a blue collar family. But me having to study chemistry and English and economics and history and music and all of this in a liberal arts school, I think gave me a fundamental curiosity for all these types of subjects that we get into during PR. Like you mentioned, the chemical industry, right? I have no experience in chemicals, but I did have to take a year of chemistry in college, which I think gave me enough to be interested in what could be done with chemistry, right?
Yeah.
Help a client be successful. So if anyone's listening, liberal arts is still great. You should still study liberal arts if you want to. Join us in
Yeah, but I
PR.
think we're a bit quick to pigeonhole, right? I mean, and we make all these different assumptions. But like you said, you had that liberal arts degree, but you also, you had that family background in the car industry, where that was such a big part of growing up, and so you did have that overlap with the mechanical sector. And for me, I always loved writing and I loved literature and things growing up. But actually, when it came to exam times, I performed terribly. I was useless. I couldn't get anywhere with it. But I kept doing really well at maths and sciences, and that sort of drove me into an education that was built around science and physics and engineering and mathematics and things like that, which are all great subjects that I love a lot and encounter in my day-to-day work. But I've been able to carve out a career that actually um, merges those sort of mathematical sides of education with the more creative, and that's another part, that's another area of what we do that I really really love. Telling those stories of engineering and power and energy and technology and science and things like that. It's yeah, I love all of it.
Yeah. Well, I think what makes doing PR for those types of companies where you're broaching on those subjects, what's different, let's say in science, than reading a science publication or a science journal is we are boiling down scientific or engineering subject material and making it digestible. But we have to envelop that in storytelling. So we're not just talking about the science or the engineering. We need to tell stories about companies and about people, really, because ultimately business is about people, no matter what the technology is. And so there may be a scientific breakthrough, but we want to look at, well, who are the people that developed it? How is it going to affect people once it's implemented? What is it doing for the economy or for the environment or for industry? Can we go behind the scenes and tell the stories of how those technologies were developed? And then, what does that say about the company that's created a new piece of technology, right? So it's not just one product. It's you want to convey that a company has an innovation pipeline that they can continually put out good products and breakthrough products and are consistently changing an industry, because in B2B, the relationships with their customers are like our relationships with them. They go on for years. They have to be trusted. You need to be able to convey to trade media or business media, what does X product mean for this company and this industry moving forward, right? So again, we have technology, we have science, we have engineering, but we're trying to envelop that in something that's a stronger story about people and about economic movement. Don't you think?
Yeah, I do. Here's a question for you, or I think something that would be interesting to get some insight on. How do you think your writing has changed from, because I still remember your original writing and like when you first joined SE10, and I don't really think your writing style has changed much. But what do you think are the big differences between, say, sitting on that, running that innovation beat at a big business publication like Business Week versus doing a lot of client content or storytelling on behalf of them? What do you think are the big differences that you've noticed?
Yeah, that's a good question. Um, well, the fundamentals are still the same, right? Of getting information through clearly and concisely, and I think getting to the point, like right away, getting to the point. Um, the differences are probably in the rhetorical flourishes. I had a little bit more fun. Maybe fun's not the right word. I could pull tricks with my writing when I wrote for business pubs like a Business Week or Fast Company. So what comes to mind is, one time we did best sneaker designs of the year for the design beat at Business Week, and I started it off with Business Week's got more kicks than a Bruce Lee flick. And it was a line from a Criss Cross song from when I was a kid, like listening to rap as like a 7-year-old. And I could throw those kind of fun things in. Or we did a story about how Disney comes up with new toys. And the story started with an anecdote like about a small child holding a toy in their hands for the first time and trying to figure it out, like with their brain, with their hands, and what that process was like, and how ultimately that's what the product was attempting to do. But then there was going to be this big behind the scenes of how you get it done. Um, I don't think we have those kind of flourishes with what we do. It's more informative. So I think it's getting to the point a bit more, writing sharper, quicker. You have a much um, educated about a specific topic audience. So I wouldn't say a more educated audience in general, but I would say if they are in construction, they're very educated in construction. So you kind of need to get, I think, right to the point of what they want to hear and get right to the results.
Yeah, they've got to retain
Yeah.
knowledge base, right? And so you have to. It's I mean, it comes down to the basics of communication and understanding your audience, right? Who am I writing for? And then using that as the starting point, and then going back and just using that as the basis of the story, or making sure you've got the narrative correct, or using the narrative then to dictate the audience. I mean, I guess that's kind of that's the interesting diversification you're getting now, right, with the shift into digital, right? Whereas, I mean, if you kind of think back to when we were doing content 10, 15 years ago, right, it would be quite one-paced. But now with the advent of increasing presences on social media for businesses, and also how they want to present themselves on the web and the different story formats they're looking to tell, and then also how we package material if we're sending it out to media, or if we're doing some comms direct to customers or out to a distributor network or something like that. The kind of the different writing styles and personalities that you can kind of build in there, I think, is, to my mind, that's been one of the most interesting and fun changes that you can have. And as a writer, I mean, if we remove the PR bit, we talked a lot about writing on this podcast so far, haven't we? But if you strip it right back to the process of journalism and storytelling, challenging yourselves to write in those different styles is it's a really good challenge for a writer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, my favorite part of the job still is when I have to write something and I just pop open a blank Word document, and it's like, what am I going to do here? And knowing 45 minutes later, I'm going to have filled the page with something polished and pristine. I still notice that when you write something like a really good piece, whether it's a good press release or a story for a magazine or something for a content hub, that when you write it really well, you get positive feedback. There is still a difference between really good writing and writing that just kind of checks the boxes, you know. I would even go so far as to say, in my experience with PR, I think being a good writer is fundamental to the job, and actually like maybe even still the basis for success, because it's presentations, it's speeches, it's press releases, it's web copy, it's talking points, it's messaging. All of that has to be written, and it has to be written sharply and precisely and accurately.
Yeah. Well, I mean that kind of brings us on. I know we're not going to do it today, but everything we've been talking about with Chat GPT, and the applications for that in B2B comms, and how successful it's going to be. I mean, I've been looking at the same examples that you have, right? And seeing how, I mean, at a base level, it is an excellent tool, really, but I think what we don't really understand yet is how it's gonna apply with the sort of client base that we have, when you're talking about very technical subjects, but at the same time trying to combine that with quite specific company narratives and key messages and things like that. I mean, I think we're probably gonna learn a lot more about that in the coming months, but it's definitely one of the most interesting parts of the industry's discussions at the moment, and it's going to be super interesting to see how it all unfolds, I think.
Yeah.